Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brenda Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brenda Welch, a self-care strategy coach and licensed acupuncturist. And today we're going to be exploring what it means to live from your heart. What does it mean to live a wholehearted existence? With me today is Dr. Brenda Walding, who is a women's holistic wellness and empowerment coach, a doctor of physical therapy who specializes in supporting and empowering women to truly heal and thrive. She's the author of Sick of Being Sick, The Women's Holistic Guide to Conquering Chronic Illness, and she is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and HeartMath Certified Coach living in just outside of Austin, Texas. Dr. Brenda Walding, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm so glad you're with me today.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You have a compelling story about the power of listening to your heart that I'd love for you to share.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. So this story spans a decade, so I'll do my best just to kind of hit the highlights and the relevant points. But yeah, so I, like so many of us, just was kind of living, I would say, I'm a recovering perfectionist, just go, 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 do, do, do. I was a, Division I athlete, went and got my doctorate in physical therapy after college. And then shortly after that, I'm moving to Austin and getting married and all many life stressors, new job, all the things. My health just completely went down the tubes. And I was experiencing really strange symptoms, mysterious illness, rashes covering my entire body for 2.5 years. In the conventional medical system, just getting more and more sick and not getting any answers, And so I was very depressed, and I ended up getting really sick and developing a systemic infection where I had pus-filled lesions all in my mouth and throat and going on disability in my late 20s. Was completely bedbound and thought that I may not make it. And so it was a really intense time. And I actually found, an article about natural healing, natural solutions to drug-resistant infections, and it really opened up my world to natural healing and nutrition. And, I thought, oh my gosh, if this really simple, it was a oregano oil that actually knocked out that infection. And which was a total eye opener for me and took me down a path of, okay, how am I going to fix myself? How do I heal myself naturally? And I started to heal and really open up my world to, like I said, nutrition, to slowing down, to taking better care of myself. But really I was still, mostly focusing on the physical aspect of healing. And also very, very much it was a full-time job almost for me to go out to all the different healers, spend all the money. I worked really hard to get well and, reclaimed my strength, went back to work as a physical therapist and, got a few different certifications in health and nutrition. And then 8 years went by and I was hoping to start a family, feeling, I would say, I thought at that time about 90% there in terms of, recovering from that really debilitating illness. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so, as you can imagine, that was pretty devastating. And I really had to take a step back because I was doing all the things and getting all the certifications and eating, perfectly. And I hadn't had sugar in 8 years. I mean, it was just, I was so disciplined. And I thought, what am I missing? Like, what am I not getting here? Like, God, what is it? And, I knew for me that conventional, chemotherapy and radiation wasn't going to be my path, but I didn't know how to navigate this because I knew I couldn't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. You've heard that common phrase. And so it was me sitting in my room in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. on the floor, just crying and going, God, what am I supposed to do? And then I heard what I call, in my book, I call it the divine whisper, and said, if you're going to survive, you're going to have to learn to listen to your heart. And it was like one of those internal voices, so clear. It was my intuition that I hadn't really ever experienced anything like that before, but I knew it was truth. And I, felt a calm come over me. But then I was like, the next moment kind of panicked because I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know how, because I'd been living, in my head most of my life.
What a powerful story on so many levels.
Right?
There's a few things that I want to touch on. Is first of all, is just how people, frequent listeners of this show, will recognize so many doctors that I talk to who have of such a similar story, not to discount the uniqueness of yours, but basically
No.
like, I was the overachiever. I was doing too much. I was racking up all these certifications. I was healing the people. I was outwardly motivated. Then I had a health crisis. Then I
Yeah.
was doing all the things, right? Then I was living holistically and doing all the things that we know to do to take care of ourselves. And yet that still is not a guarantee that we're going to be like 100% well. And I can really relate to that myself as someone who educates on the essential habits of self-care that we all need to have, because healing is this body, mind, spirit thing. And then being challenged on yet another level, being threatened with this sort of additional health crisis of breast cancer, and being challenged to listen to your heart in order to survive, and therefore having to really like question your entire operating system or your hard drive
Yeah.
programming about what it means, how to even go about living life. So I just want to, first of all, I'm so impressed and amazed by anyone who is willing to actually take that internal guidance without knowing how, or like just to really divert for like, okay, you really need to show up differently in the world in a huge way. And so I imagine that you had to learn just so many different things about how to listen internally, as opposed to operating from the head up, or operating from a quote unquote holistic way, but without necessarily honoring your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the saying was, how do I do this? And that was the initial thought, was, how do I listen to my heart when the stakes are so high? Right.
Yeah.
Like when I think like, oh, I could possibly lose my life. And, my first instinct was, oh, I'm going to go research everything and like reach out to all of my practitioner friends and like do all. And it was like, no, get off the internet, like, get really still, get really quiet. I didn't really tell very many people, because I really knew that I needed stillness to begin to tune in, because I hadn't been practiced in that way of connecting. And so, yeah, and it's pretty interesting. And once I really made that commitment, then, the larger picture after, my story kind of took many different twists and turns, and my heart guided me in different directions. But, it really was the greatest gift of my life.
I love that you started with stillness and going inward, right? Because the heart doesn't yell, right? That an inner
Right.
wisdom doesn't shriek from the rooftops often, at least in my experience, it doesn't. And you minimized the number of voices that could confuse you potentially or influence you. If and also, it seems so wise to, especially around cancer. There's so much fear in the collective consciousness around it,
Yes.
that it was probably really like really excellent wisdom to take yourself out of that sort of like everyone else's fear, and to just anyway, it seems like that could protect the clear channel that your inner wisdom would have with your conscious mind.
Yes, that's exactly, you're spot on. Like I knew, because I knew I wasn't going to take that conventional path, and I knew a lot of people would have a lot of things to say about that, and there would be fear around that for some people. And I knew I was so vulnerable and so newly practiced in having the courage to live from my heart and listen, that I wasn't able to deal with that outside fear. I needed to keep my energy and my being in this place of love and connection, and really listening, and without that influence of fear, because I did know enough to know that any decision made from a place of fear was not my highest good.
Exactly. So
So
I'm
yeah.
curious, what were those initial steps like as a beginner in trusting your heart, but knowing that this was vitally important? I'm
Yeah.
curious what that actually looked like for you. How did you start on that new path?
Yeah. And yet definitely was a beginner. So when I say stillness, I didn't have this epic meditation practice or, was well versed in that, but I knew that I needed that stillness and that quiet. So that was that first part of not telling a bunch of people and really being careful of my energy. So lots of laughter and comedies, and I really removed all the negativity, even the songs, the TV, all those things. I That was one of the first things I was really clear about. And then the other two things that really stuck out and was really beautiful, how my heart really showed up. It was like two resources were, Brene Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection, came across my path, actually her art journaling course. And she shares these 10 guideposts for wholehearted living that she found in her qualitative research of men and women who were living these really deep and meaningful and happy lives. And so she started, talking about these qualities. And so as I'm reading this, I'm going, oh, wow. She talks a lot about, for example, letting go of perfectionism and cultivating self-compassion. And a lot of these heart qualities, I began to cultivate them. And that was part of my journey. Things like compassion, vulnerability, gratitude, laughter, song, dance, authenticity. So these things that I've heard of, but I hadn't really truly tried them on and was really living them out. So that was one tool.
Oh, I'm gonna just interject
Of
here because
course.
Brene Brown, I
Right?
just love her so much. She's someone whose work has really influenced me, and I wanted to share this beautiful definition that she has of wholeheartedness, where she defines wholeheartedness as, quote, engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going
Mm,
to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am brave and worthy of love and belonging.
yes. I love it.
And she is yeah, I just said so well. So she has this qualitative research on wholeheartedness that has these various components. And so which of those components did you dive the deepest into?
Well, I will say to be honest with you, I actually studied her book and her art journaling course like it was like my life depended on it. I don't know, for some reason I had this intuition that this was so important in my healing, and it has been, and that's a lot of what I teach. I created sort of this my own wholehearted healing framework, which a lot of that is influenced by this work. But one thing that really comes to mind, well, two things. One is this dance really, was something that I hadn't really tapped into before. I always thought I was not good enough to dance, or I didn't, but I jumped into that, dove into that as a form of expression and moving emotional energy and healing my emotional body. So that became a really powerful healing tool. And then, she speaks a lot about vulnerability and connection. And I had I told you that I didn't really share a bunch as I was traveling. I went to different cancer healing centers, alternative healing centers in the United States, and went to different things. My heart led me different paths. It was quite a crazy adventure, but I didn't tell a whole lot of people. And, along the path, my heart was really leading me to have a mastectomy, which is something I was really not wanting to do. I didn't really want to do any conventional medicine. And, my heart was really leading me in that direction. And at that time, because we spent so much money on all the alternative therapies, we lost our home, we lost our savings, and we moved back to Austin, and our in-laws, allowed us to stay there. And then I was going to dive into this surgery. And at this time, I'm reading Brene Brown's book about around vulnerability and how this is this bridge to all these things that we really desire: connection, joy, belonging, intimacy, and it's powerfully healing. And, I kind of had this skeptical, like, really? Like, I don't really like the idea of, being super vulnerable with people. and letting people in. But as I'm getting ready to, have my breast removed and the vulnerability of that, there's a lot of different emotions going on for me, especially not wanting to do that, but feeling called to. I reached out in this place of utter vulnerability to several women and just said, I don't know what I need, but I need help. And I shut my computer down after writing that email and started crying and ran out the door because I was so vulnerable. And something magical happened. I had a friend create this women's healing circle for me and just had me show up right before my surgery. And I had never connected with other women in that way in my entire life. And it just opened up this whole, which has become one of my passions in my life. And, to really connect with women in a sacred, healing way. But I went into that surgery a completely different person, feeling completely supported and connected and loved, and had a sense of courage that I could not have received in any other way except for those women supporting me.
That's such a beautiful story. And I can totally see how you would be resistant to asking for the very help that would be transformative in helping you feel that love, that sense of community, which is so essential. And I see that in the coaching groups that I lead of these women who just support each other because we are we can all relate to the same struggles. And when we have the willingness to be vulnerable, it creates a kind of trust that gets layered on, and it allows for such love and such connection that is healing in and of itself.
Yeah, and that was something that really opened up for me, not only in my own life. I felt an incredible amount. And after that circle and after I healed, I was the women were like, why do we not do this? And I really took that on. It became this passion of, I created a women's circle, and I do a lot of healing circles in my community. And it's a passion of mine now that was completely created from my willingness to be vulnerable. And I had no idea what was possible, to have that sense of authentic connection. And, the research that's coming out around connection and loneliness,
Yes.
loneliness, I think it was the statistic was chronic loneliness is equivalent to smoking
A
10 plus
pack
cigarettes.
a
Yeah.
pack of cigarettes a day
Yeah.
is a yeah. So that in terms of the likelihood of or being a risk factor for death for women, right? So it is we
Yes.
need each other. We are hardwired to the tend and befriend response, right? That takes down our stress levels. Feel like we are mammals. We're social creatures. We need each other, and we are living in these little atomized lives in our separate little houses. And it's we absolutely do need community. It's so lacking.
Yeah, and I think that's overlooked so much in if you're on a healing journey or you just want to live an amazing life. I think that's one of the things that women overlook because living even in partnership, you think, oh well, I have a partner, but
Right.
surrounding yourself with sisterhood and tribe, that will exponentially open up this incredible life and allow and facilitate greater depths of healing
It's
and
really, really
joy.
true.
Yeah.
Bringing shame out of the shadows and holding space for people to speak it and dissolve it is a big part of what I do with my clients. I love watching people let go of it because it's so often at the root of things like stress or emotional eating, or even being willing to sit down and meditate. Shame gets in the way of feeling like we even have the right to take care of ourselves. So when we're willing to go there, we're able to show up in a new, more powerful way. What I do is not therapy, it's coaching, using the self-study tools and the energetic lens of Chinese medicine to help you see yourself and your survival strategies in a way that catalyzes deep self-acceptance. If it's time for you to invest in your own transformation and are thinking about working with me one-on-one, head to brodywelch.com and apply. I want to go back to something you said, which was that your heart was telling you that you needed to have this mastectomy, but
Mhm.
you didn't really want to. How
Yeah.
do you determine what your heart, that voice is in fact coming from your heart? And are you using the words heart and intuition interchangeably?
Yes, I am talking about the intuitive heart. I know that we have this organ that pumps blood to all of our, oxygenated blood to all of our systems of our body and to our other organs and things. And that's an incredible thing in and of itself. But then there's also this aspect of this intuitive, intelligent heart. The organizations like HeartMath are really beginning to dive into research. And so, yes, when I'm speaking of the heart in this context, I'm really focusing on this intuitive heart. And so to answer your question, yeah, as you can imagine, I know I explained this a little bit, but because of my experience with conventional medicine, I was like, I am not doing this. I am not doing that. I just want to go this natural and holistic path. But I went to different clinics and I did all this alternative therapy and treatments, and the tumor did not shrink, and it was really bumping up against the pectoral wall. And I had a decision to make, and it was like, are you going to listen to your heart, or are you going to be stubborn and do? It was part of me that felt shame to do the conventional medical path when I said that I didn't want to. But overall, the commitment was to listen to my heart. And so when you ask that question, I began to learn that some of the ways that our heart and our intuition speaks to us is through symbols and through synchronicity. And, those things, and being really clued in to those and listening. So asking the question and being in the listening of asking for guidance and listening for the answers. And sometimes, for me in my journey, it came through like that divine whisper where I had that inner knowing. And then with this particular situation, I was in California, and I just spent our life savings on a treatment that didn't create the results I had hoped for. And all of my advisors and my natural and holistic doctors were recommending the mastectomy. And I was sitting in a park on my yoga mat, looking at the tree and just asking my heart, asking God, like, what am I really supposed to do this? I don't want to do this. And this may sound crazy, but I really feel like and I know so many people share about this, is signs and symbols and synchronistic interactions. Sometimes you get the book, or you meet the person, and that gives you the guidance. But for me, I'm sitting in a park in front of this beautiful purple tree, and it's like growing upwards, and then it takes this like radical like slant to the side. And I was so drawn to it. I sat right in front of it to meditate and to really just feel into what my next steps were. And I kind of heard this intuition, this voice again that was, she's lopsided, but she's still beautiful.
I love it.
And I just started crying, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And it was like, and I just knew like that was my next step, and that no matter what, like that, I was still going to be beautiful, and I was going to still be worthy and still be loved. But this was my next step.
That's almost a form of shamanism, right? Like the ability to divine your next step from an object in the natural world, or from in this case, a living creature in the natural world, the tree, and getting a sense of how that relates to your own life. And in case it's not necessarily always that clear for people, but that is absolutely like the meaning that we make of the things that we're surrounded by. It's not accidental, right? Like it can be a way that we can kind of give voice to intuitive things that without necessarily asking the question, but just
like
that
tuning in. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
nature, like for me, nature, I get a lot of, when I'm in nature and I get away and immerse myself in nature, I'm able to connect much more with my heart and listen and get messages that way. And I
Yes.
think it's different for everyone, but I know that's pretty common for a lot of
Well,
people.
and it's really different than like looking up like what does a lopsided tree mean in a book, like
Sure.
or like that, just that the symbols are not necessarily universal. They can be really.
Right.
And in Chinese medicine, we see the heart as more than just the thing that pumps the blood. We also see it as the emotional center.
Mm.
We also see it as really the seat of intelligence, and consciousness. There's these different souls that we assign to the different organ systems, and it's the job of the heart to be like the conductor of the orchestra that integrates all of them, so that we can function with our intuition, with our intention, with our imagination, and with our will, all working together. And so so in Chinese medicine, the heart is the emperor of the body. It's held in high regard. We of course can't live without it, but that it is really, it's this esteemed organ that has this role in consciousness where it's like it's much more central than the brain even. And of course, this
Yeah.
is so. I'm curious if we can delve a little bit into heart math and the science of the heart's intelligence and power, because Chinese medicine, I think, is deep and wise in its ancient tradition. But I just love it when the paradigms collide and science bears out what the wisdom traditions have to say. So, tell us a little bit about why we should trust our heart.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you said that because I don't, my background isn't necessarily in Chinese medicine, although I do work with, healers in my own journey to support my health. But I love the way that you explain that. And that's what I was just thinking when you were saying that. I was like, oh, from a heart math perspective, there's now science is really basically corroborating everything that you just said, which was so beautiful. And so, just some of the simple things, that scientifically with the heart, like you said, the heart's so much more than this muscle. And they found that it has its own heart, brain, its own nervous system. And, they even, some things that really helped me, like I said, heart math was the other thing that really met me where I was at, because it really lent itself to this logical, analytical part of me that really was in my head. So that this scientific perspective of, looking at the heart and the heart's intelligence really met me where I was at. So I think it's really supportive for a lot of people that are in that same capacity. But some of the things about the heart, just to start with, and then I'll share a little bit about what heart math is. But the heart, like you said, just like the mind, has its own governing ability, and it's actually more powerful. So the heart is 100 times more powerful magnetically and 60 times more powerful electrically than the brain, which I thought was super cool. And, one thing is the heart starts beating in the developing fetus before the brain is even formed. And so that tells me, tells us so much that I thought the brain was controlling everything, but the heart is actually beating and formed before the brain is even formed in the developing fetus. So I thought that was really cool. And then, the heart has more pathways to the brain than the brain does to the heart. And so the heart and the brain are constantly communicating.
Yeah, the gut has that as well, right? That
Yeah.
there's as many neurons going from the gut to the brain than there is in the spinal cord, which we think of as being the central nervous system. So yeah, we're learning all these cool stuff about our intuitive body and like the way that we can actually trust the physical organs and our physical selves just as much, that they are actually communicating with the brain their own sense of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And so they, found that when the brain and the heart are communicating and in sync and working together, then we experience this state of optimal physiological functioning. So the heart and the mind and our emotions are all working in sync, which also, creates harmony in the systems, the hormone system, the nervous system. So when we can sync up the heart with the brain and there's this great communication, then not only do we have this internal harmony, which creates more ease, which is the state in which we can heal. And also there's many other benefits of that, optimal state, things like better focus, better performance, better sleep, decreased fatigue, depression. So many benefits of being in that harmonious state and the heart and the brain communicating. And so, that all of this research is really powerful. It's like, how do we get the brain and the heart to communicate? Because when it's cut off, when we're not really getting influence or information from the heart, when we're really stuck in our head, it creates a state of what we call incoherence or disharmony, which can lead to dis-ease over time. So that's really powerful. And the thing that they found was that we can access this state of coherence and harmony through a state of coherence, which involves slowing down the breath and activating positive emotional states. So the emotion is a really big factor in connecting the heart and the brain, or disconnecting the heart and the brain.
I've used is it called the Inner Balance, the HeartMath
Yeah.
app? Yeah, I got one of those a few years ago, and I really appreciated that. I mean, because of course I've been working with the breath in my yoga and qigong and meditation training, and that working with how to use the breath to address our physiology. But I really loved that idea of not only is it about breathe out, but it's about just engendering this sense of peace in the heart while that's taking place. And I just felt like that was such a beautiful addition.
Yeah, yeah. In HeartMath, there's a difference between rest and ease, like increasing the parasympathetic nervous system response, and coherence. Coherence involves, yes, slowing the breath, but it's also this really regenerative state that involves was created with elevated emotional state because it actually builds energy. And so it's combining the breath, slowing the breath with these heart emotions like love and gratitude and compassion.
What do you mean by it builds energy?
Yeah, so it's all really about, what I've come to realize. It's all about energy. So it's this idea that, really focusing on intelligent energy management. So the ability to self-regulate and to manage energy is this ability to control your inner state with respect to your emotions, thoughts, your attention. So our emotions and our thoughts, these are all this is all energy. And so when we're able to self-regulate and manage this energy, we can put our body in this state of ease and optimal function. And so we can do that with various tools, these HeartMath tools and technologies that you were speaking about, as we can learn these practices. And when we are able to manage our energy and regulate our energy, that has huge impact on our overall quality of life and our ability to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. In Chinese medicine, there are three treasures. There's the qi, the jing, and the shen, and those have to be they all have to be working well in order for us to be healthy. And like, so the jing is our essential essence. It's also
Mm.
our reserves that we tap into. The chi is the energy that we create day to day, and the shen is the consciousness. And so it's just like everything you're saying, it's like how we cultivate strong shen. It sounds like heart math would be an amazing tool for that. I'm wondering if you can walk us through any of the practices where we can start working towards coherence.
Yeah, sure. So one of the most basic tools that I begin teaching my clients is quick coherence. And literally it takes just a few minutes. And so, it starts with really begin breathing in and out of the heart. So we call it heart focused breathing. So if you're listening, you can just begin focusing with your attention. So I do know where your attention goes, the chi and energy flows, right?
Absolutely.
I know a little qigong.
Mhm.
Um, so breathing, focus your attention on the area of the heart, and then you begin breathing in and out of the heart, and breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. So that might be about 4 to 5 seconds in and about 4 to 5 seconds out in a rhythm that's comfortable for you. So even just the heart focused breathing. So say you are, and what I love about HeartMath tools is they're real time tools. So I could be talking to a coworker and feel this sense of anxiety coming up in my body and know what that feels like. And then I can begin this heart focused breathing and kind of take that edge off. And that's what I talk when we talk about self regulation is I have the awareness that I'm starting to feel anxious in my body. And then I can begin to regulate that by slowing down my breath. And then as you continue breathing in and out of the heart, you make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative emotion, is what we call it. And so that is, you know, think and feel into the feeling of love or gratitude or care for someone or something in your life. So instead of just thinking about gratitude, you actually allow yourself to feel. So you have this thing that maybe it's a person, a situation, a pet, something that comes to mind, and then you're able to really allow yourself to feel that emotion.
Easier said than done at times. But yes, if we can conjure up that drop of gratitude, it can be
Yes.
transformative to our state.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because coherence, this coherent state where this optimal, the mind, the body, and the emotions are all in sync. The heart is in this beautiful rhythm, and we're gaining the benefits of being in this coherent state. It's also, it's like a battery that the more you practice, the more it gets charged. So the more energy that you have. And so when you are in that, so say you practice coherence, so I'll have my clients practice coherence when it's really quiet, closing their eyes, then they're building up those energy reserves. And then when a challenging situation comes, there's so much, they're much more able to get to regulate their internal state and get into that place of coherence because they practice and they charge their battery. So it builds.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the importance of practice because yes, like we are training for life with our practices, and then we get to put them into practice as we are living in these circumstances. We can draw upon those tools.
Yes, yes. So it helps you to be more resilient in the face of adversity or challenges, because we're all going, no matter what, we're all going to deal with challenging circumstances. It's really how we think about those things and how we respond emotionally, which really affect our actions and what happens in our physiology. And so, we know that stress is a huge impact on, how good we feel, developing, illness. And so really being able to self-regulate and manage energy is huge in terms of living your best life and to heal.
Yeah, such an important point that we talk about on the show all the time is it that yes, if it's probably our most important survival tool for the 21st century is being able
Right.
to handle the stress and the pace of life, and coming back into ourselves, tuning into our heart is a fantastic way of doing that.
Yeah.
I understand that you have a free gift for listeners. I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, as Brody mentioned earlier, in my bio, I am the author and recently published a book called Sick of Being Sick, The Woman's Holistic Guide to Conquering Chronic Illness. And in that book I share my story in a lot more detail, and then what I found and my own experience and the research of so many other men and women who were not only healing naturally, but we're able to, use these healing health challenges as opportunities to create an even more extraordinary life. And what were those qualities, those essentials, and what did they all have in common? And so I created this wholehearted healing framework. And so in it, I share these 9 essentials. And so that's really what this book is about, is to create this holistic healing roadmap. What are all the things that are super important beyond just the physical? What are the things that I wish I would have known 10 years ago to be able to heal and reclaim my life? And so I wanted to lay that out for women. And if you're a man listening to, these are applicable as well. But my focus and my work is really on women. And so I would like to offer all of you a free electronic copy. So if you would like to take advantage of that, you can go to www.sickofbeingsickbook.com and get a free copy.
Wonderful. I will definitely have that in the show notes available for people, and sounds like a really great resource to take advantage of. Dr. Brenda Walding, thank you so much for being such a wonderful and informative guest today on Healthy Curiosity.
Thank you so much for having me. It was super fun.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.